years ago when the Arts and when the North Augusta Heritage Council put on a program, Lark told me that when they designed the building and this particular room, that there was a desire to have events other than council meetings here. And so we've got an event here today. This is
This took us 14 years.
this is the second event. When the Heritage Committee of the Arts and Heritage Center met, we talked about having some day programs. We used to have monthly programs for the Heritage Council, but that's kind of hard to do. But we hope to, in the future, not on a monthly basis, but to have more programs in this room right here. We're honored today to have our former mayor, one of the key people for the reason for this building to even be here, Lark Jones. When we had the Heritage Council meetings, we had this particular program, pretty much this particular program. But we're excited. It was really an exciting program to have because we're going to learn about businesses that are no longer here. Lark knows about every one of them. He used every one of them. But it is an honor to introduce my lifelong friend, Lark Jones, to give this program today. Thank you.
Thank you, Millage. I didn't realize there were so many people in North Augusta that didn't have much to do on Thursday afternoon. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about myself that most of you know. I was born in University Hospital, and back in those days, which was, I tell people I'm in my 9th decade. And that sounds like I'm really old. I'm not 90 years old, but I was born in 1949, so if you do the math, I'm in my 9th decade. My mother, when I was born, she actually came home with me in an ambulance. That's how she got home from the hospital. And I was brought up to a green cottage on Carolina Avenue, which is still there. John Murdoch lives behind it, and I know John's not doing well, but it's still there. Then my parents bought a home on West Avenue from Mr. Gregory of Gregory Lake, and it was a brand new house. And in that house today, my lifelong friend, Millage Murray, lives in that house. So I still have a connection to it. We moved around to Fairwood Avenue, which then was not paved. Woodlawn Avenue, one of the main things through Hammond Hills, was not paved until about 1960, I think. Martintown Road was 2 lanes. I mean, this is how trains still went on the Greenway till I got Bill Burkall here to fact check me, but I think it was about 1960 that the trains quit going through the middle of North Augusta. So then the first house I bought was on Arlington Heights. Now I've lived on Stanton Drive for 40-something years. And a couple of months ago, my wife and I were riding around town, and I came to the realization that in all the homes I've lived in, every one of them's been in North Augusta, and hardly they're no more than the furthest apart any of them are is probably just a little over a mile. So that's, this day and age, that's unusual. I don't think I'm still the mayor. It says mayor. I haven't been mayor for 6 years. This was just done when I was mayor. And I told Kevin, and I want to give a shout out to Kevin Whaley in the booth up there. He put all this together for me years ago. He was smart enough to keep it. He's smart enough to tell me I only have to press 2 buttons to get this thing to move. He brought me water. He's been a good friend and very helpful to me throughout my career as mayor. And if you know what the Lark Nation is, he's responsible for a lot of the intel on Lark Nation. So without going any further, I will say that everything you see here is personal to me. There may be some things you say, well, why didn't he put such and such in there? He didn't remember that. Everybody knew about that. It just wasn't that personal to me. If it's personal to you and it brings up a memory to you, that's part of the purpose of what we're doing here, to make you rekindle some of the past memories and things that meant to you growing up. Because it's, most of these places, it's not what it was the experiences that we had at that place that gives us the memories. All right. We're not even going to get through the first slide, and you see there is Georgia Avenue. Immediately, I hope it's big enough up there that you can see a lot of it, but immediately when I pull this up, look at the size of those telephone poles. Those things must be 50 feet high. I don't remember the telephone poles being that big. Also, you see there it says Colonial Store. Well, that's Sheila's and Your Pie now. And it was Ming Yat's for many, many years before it became Sheila's and Your Pie and a couple of other places. We don't park cars in front of it anymore. When's the last time you've seen a Borden's milk delivery truck? Just doesn't happen. Look off in the distance. There are no steeples for Grace Methodist Church or First Baptist Church. So the times, they are a-changing. Down goes forward and up arrow goes backwards. I'm trying to remember that. This is more shots of Georgia Avenue on the, I guess your left is my left. The left, you see a Texaco station, which is the feed and seed. And on the right, you see a Gulf station, which was one of Luke Cooper's stations for a long period of time. 2 gas stations right in the middle of town. And we'll get into that a little bit further. On the left, on the trees, that's where the Colonial Store, later Big Star, later Ming Yat's, was built. Georgia Avenue, and I believe these shots are old enough, that Georgia Avenue was paved 2 lanes with parking on either side that was still dirt. On the right-hand side, you see those houses there. That's where I believe Gary's and Wells Fargo Bank are now. And then, of course, you see another shot of downtown, not too different from the first shot. Okay. Mitchell's Grocery. How many of you have ever been to Mitchell's Grocery? Boy, more than half. That was my hangout as a kid. Again, I lived over on Fairwood, which was less than a mile from Mitchell's. And I've got stories on just about every one of these places, and believe it or not, I'm going to tell them. I had a tough time just getting a picture of Mitchell's, and there it is in the background. If you went to Mitchell's, you never saw Bob Mitchell unless he was out front with a cigar in his mouth talking to somebody. Bob Mitchell and Harry Howard and Dr. Watson were the 3 top supporters of North Augusta athletics and the Yellow Jacket Club and all of those things. But Mr. Mitchell never worked in the store. On the other hand, I think Florence Mitchell was there 24 hours a day. I never went in there that she wasn't in there with the beginning of osteoporosis standing over the cash register. That's their Cadillac underneath that carport. I don't know if she ever drove it or not because she was always in that store. But my claim to fame is this is back in the day when we had deposit return drink bottles. And I would walk from my house to Mitchell's along Martintown Road there without a penny in my pocket. Todd Glover's up there. He'll enjoy this story if I hadn't told it to him 10 times before. But I would walk up there with nothing, pick up enough bottles, and turn them in to Miss Mitchell, and she'd give me 2 cents apiece, and I'd get 8 or 10 cents together, which was enough to get a Coca-Cola, and read comic books until she told me it was time for me to go home. If I had a little bit extra, I could get a baseball card. And if you guys out there remember, you could get a baseball card individually wrapped, one card with a piece of bubble gum for 1 penny. And I've got some Mickey Mantles and Sandy Koufaxes and all that were purchased right there at Mitchell's grocery store. That's what it looks like now, kinda. There've been some attempts to develop it, but it hadn't happened. The Georgia line of physical therapy and doctor's office is to the left of that, just down a little bit. The Amber House. Thank goodness for the internet. There's many bad things that are happening on the internet. There are good things like you can type in Amber House and doggone if that picture didn't come up. This was on US 1. If you look right in the middle of the picture, you see the 2 lanes going up the hill. That's US 1. The Palmetto Parkway wasn't there, believe it or not. It was a restaurant and also considered a truck stop. People in the know called it the Burr House, B-E-R. Big hangout after football games. They did provide, I think, car curb service. I'm guessing it probably closed, what would you think, millage, Bill, 60s? Yeah. And, of course, it became a fireworks stand where you can also buy ice for what used to be $1 a bag and is now $2 a bag as inflation takes hold. The White Midget. How many of you here have eaten in the White Midget? We're losing a few folks. It was a small diner in the middle of town, and you'll see where in just a minute if you're not familiar with it. And if you will notice, it was a big-time chain, the White Midget System. Can you imagine trying to name a restaurant today the White Midget? I mean, that is politically incorrect on several levels. But it had a White Midget in Sylacauga, Alabama, and North Augusta, South Carolina. I believe it was brothers that opened them, and Jim Neighbors, who became Gomer Powell, was in that family, and that brought him here to North Augusta. Now, this is the next part. I don't know if you can read it, but I'm going to read it to you. This is the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night. The prices from the White Midget. It was ahead of its time, as so many other things were, and some of the things that I'm showing you. Where you see that outline of the state of South Carolina, it says Carolina Fried Chicken. Down at the bottom, it's lip-smacking good. This predated Colonel Sanders' finger-licking good. Now, underneath that, it says steaks. Extra large T-bone steak, French fries, salad, butter and rolls, $3.50. Take a trip down here to Bentley's and tell them that's what you're looking for, the $3.50 extra large T-bone steak. you could get a box of Carolina fried chicken, golden brown fried potatoes, creamy coleslaw, rolls, and honey, $1. Coffee, tea, 10 cents. That's around 1960. Here's an ad that says at the bottom, January 23rd, 1960, the White Midget Special, hamburger and milkshake, 20 cents. I guarantee you, I don't remember it, but I guarantee you I was there. That just shows you. Then this was the honey baked hams. It was Jeff Lacey's office. The city actually used this building for a while in the, I guess, 70s. Okay. And it is now just been painted white, and the real estate company's there. It's been an attorney's office. But when they first did this building, the White Midget was a little kind of a metal diner, and they built this building around it, and it was still inside of the building for the longest time. People's Drugstore. Every town had a hangout, and People's Drugstore was, not only could you get drugs and personal pharmaceutical services, they had an old-fashioned soda fountain inside. And it was just right in the middle of town. This is the back of it. This is the group that they had morning coffee at People's Drugstore. I don't think all of them could fit in there at one time. But they had a little reunion. This was probably done, I'm guessing, in the 70s, because if you look right behind Bill, do you remember what the lady's name was in the picture that ran the place? I made a vow when I came back and opened my office, which was right across the street. I wasn't going to go over there because I'd be there all day long. But right in the middle of the picture, behind the black lady there, that young child in the picture is your state representative, Bill Hickson. I did a quick survey of those in that picture, and I believe there are still 5 people that are still living in that picture. And you'd recognize Bainham's, Harry Howard. I don't see Johnny Oots in that picture, but A.L. Metz, Herman Avant, Elmer Reeves, Ed Bruce, the barber for years. He's down on the front in the yellow shirt. That's Dr. George Thurman on the bottom sitting down. But those were a lot of old-time North Augusta. Doug Smith, the lawyer, is in the back row. Next to him, on his left, far left, is John Youngeter. The Hilltop Drive-In. Show of hands of those who went to the Hilltop Drive-In. Oh, boy, much, much higher. You can see the blue arrow. You're getting a 2-for-1 here. As I looked at the picture this morning, you're going to get a 2-for-1. The Hilltop Drive-In, right there where the arrow was. We also had a second drive-in theater very close to this, on down the Atomic Highway. Does anybody remember what the name of it was? Cloverleaf, that's right. Well, you would know. You drove by to come into town, wouldn't you, Scott? Yeah. The Cloverleaf was right there where Buddy Wirtz's place is now. It didn't survive as long as the Hilltop. The Hilltop lasted into the 70s, I think 1977. A couple of stories on the Hilltop. Well, one in particular, and I got 1 or 2 more slides, but to the top left hand there was an African-American community, and this was back in the day where they couldn't get in their car and drive into the Hilltop. And so they would take their lawn chairs and come up down there on Gentry Lane and put their lawn chairs as close to the theater as they could, where they could see. And then when nobody was looking, they would run over to the little speakers and turn all the speakers towards their chairs and cut them up as loud as they could so they could watch the movies. This is back in the era when it was, $5 a carload and that sort of thing. Now, your twofer, if you will look over to the right, above this little white area, this borrow pit there, Millage Murray will know where it is. That was the Seven Lakes Par 3. And if I'm correct, Millage, you had a hole-in-one there, didn't you? Millage had a hole-in-one there. I might have been playing with him. But in any event, again, way ahead of its time. Not that it was a par 3 golf course, it was lighted, and you could play all of the holes at night. I don't know why something like that in Augusta did not survive with us being the home of golf like we are. That's the inside of the hilltop, and I'm sure that was taken probably long after it closed. It looks like all the speakers are gone. That used to be another thing when people would drive off with the speaker in the car and take it home with. When I was in college at Carolina, I had a couple of guys who had drive-in speakers as their speakers for their stereo. Yeah. That's some question. He's buried up there on the hill somewhere. Of course, this was the hilltop was taken over by the BTC Center, which is still there, of course, and in operation. The Mar Theater. It's the 506 building. It's been vacant for quite some time. It was a theater built in, I want to say, probably 51 or 2 or something of that nature. Believe it or not, I got an email about 2 months ago from a North Augustan who is a student at Clemson and is doing things on theaters and stuff like that, and he asked me about the Mar Theater, and I was able to give him some information. It didn't last long. It would open and close. You got to remember, there were not televisions in every household when movies were big. That's why every town had multiple movie theaters in their downtown. But with the advent of television, the movie theaters, they lost a lot of their clientele. I would go back in the day where they would run the B Westerns on Saturday morning and you could get in for $0.25. I hate to keep saying it, but it was unique in that if you remembered the Mar Theater, they had 2 special rooms in the back of the theater. Both of them were glassed in with separate speakers in the walls. One was for parents with small children who could come to the theater, bring their children, and let them run loose or play toys and stay in that room and not bother the other patrons. The other room was for people who wanted to smoke while they were watching the movies. The other unique thing that the Mar Theater had, I heard somebody say it, love seats. They had love seats where 2 people could sit together in one theater chair. Now we've got those things that lean back and vibrate and all that sort of stuff. But they had love seats. Well, when Millage and I went, we'd sit together in the love seat and pretend it was the top of a stagecoach, and both of us, one was the driver and one was the armed gunman as we watched the movies. And there it is. I started saying, there it is today. There it is 6, 7, well, Kevin, you said 14, 15. So 8, 9 years ago. And to show you how thorough Kevin is, if you look at those tags, when he put this picture on there, he blacked out the tag numbers. Jordan Hardware. Not going to ask for a show of hands on Jordan Hardware because I know the vast majority of you use Jordan Hardware. Bill Jordan, that was the go-to place. You remember, there was no Lowe's. There was no Walmart. I mean, it just wasn't there. It was Jordan Hardware. And they had any and everything, but the thing they had the most were the old retired, well, the people our age who worked in there, and you could go in there and say, I need this, and they'd find it, and I'd say, well, now how does this work? Next thing you know, they'd fixed it for you, and all you had to do was go in and hook it up. Something that you don't get much anymore, personal service. Jordan Hardware was right there on George Avenue where the, whatever it is, the Pelican thing is. Lar Franz. Most of us called it La Franz, but legally it was Lar Franz. And it's, I don't know, this again was taken 7, 8, 9 years ago and became, guess what? A Mexican restaurant. One of 46 in North Augusta. It was a hamburger joint. Its claim to fame was numerous high school students. The middle school was up Edgefield Road, about a quarter of a mile up the road. It's where most of us went to high school, if we went to North Augusta High School. Been to middle school for a number of years, still is the middle school. I told somebody the other day with the new high school, and if you haven't seen the new high school, you got to go look at it. I said, you know you're getting old when the high school they built after you graduated has been torn down and they built another one. But the claim to fame for Lar Franz was that certain kids, not myself, I was a pretty decent boy, would leave the school grounds and go down there and eat. And I never did that, but they had pinball machines in La Franz. And if you were familiar with pinball machines, that was legal, illegal gambling in South Carolina at that time. You could, if you got enough scores, it would roll up games. And if you amassed games, you could cash the games in for a nickel a game. And we had a guy that we went to school with that was such a good pinball player, his nickname became Knocker, because he could knock the pinball machine to keep the ball alive so he could run up a higher score in more games. Cooper's gas stations. If there was a gas station in North Augusta, Luke Cooper, who was Randy Cooper and Pat Carpenter's father, he ran it. There was one, he had one down by past the, well, right across here. It was a sock station for a while. Then he had the golf station, which I'll show you in a minute. And then he moved over to the feed and seed next to my office. But the gas station was kind of like a barber shop in that was a place where everybody would hang around. We saw this one earlier, but it showed as Phillips 66. It was Texaco then. The Boardman family owned that station for many, many years until Mary Steele bought it to put in the feed and seed. The Gulf station, it was Attaway Gulf for quite some time, and the Attaway brothers went to school with me. Joe Gabriel, if you remember, turned it into the Pink Dipper. The Pink Dipper was further up the street and then moved down to this station, I'm going to say in the mid to late 70s. Y'all can, if you think you got a better idea, let me know. But it's been there for a number of years. Mr. Templeton had a Esso station. Esso became Exxon, part of Standard Oil. And Mr. Templeton ran that station. That was kind of the elite station of North Augusta, I guess. You know, he got 21 cents a gallon instead of 19.9. But it was where, up the street on this side, where Jackson Square is. The health food store. If you remember back in the day, the health food store was open on Sunday. How they violated the blue laws and did that, I will never know. It was run for many, many years by Mr. Holmes and the Rushton family, who many of you probably know from North Augusta, Wilson Rushton, Tommy Rushton, Vern Rushton. They ran it for a shorter period of time. It then became Black's Shoe Repair Shop. But this was back in the day when after, as you can see Georgia Avenue is 2 lanes. This picture is about 49 or 50. You can still see how Georgia Avenue is paved, but the sides there, they are not paved. They're still dirt. They just had so much activity. They're very hard pan. After church on Sunday, the thing to do in North Augusta was you rode over to the S&S on Broad Street, and you went to eat at the S&S. And my father, bless his heart, took the family to the S&S just about every Sunday. And I can remember I'd get the same thing every Sunday. I'd get hamburger steak, green beans, macaroni and cheese, corn stick, and a piece of chocolate cake and tea, and it was like $1. I'd be eating there right now if it was. But we would, on the way home, my dad would stop at the health food store, and he would give my brother and I a dime. And they had all of the penny candy. And we would go in there, and we would get chum gum, BB bats, Kits, if you remember those names. And we would get all that. We'd get so much candy for a dime, they'd have to give us a bag to put it in. And that, we kept the dentist in Augusta in business because of that. The health food store is now the playground for Grace Methodist Church. Believe it or not, when Weldon Wyatt built the new Walmart, and he sent people to visit with me to ask me, what does North Augusta need that it doesn't have? One of the things I said was appliance stores. You couldn't buy, this is before Lowe's, Nancy. You couldn't buy a refrigerator, a washing machine in North Augusta. We had that on Georgia Avenue back in the day, Georgia, Carolina. Look at those names across the top. If you can't make them out, these were the biggies of that era. Westinghouse, Maytag, GE, RCA, Hot Point. Some of those are still big names. But one thing I want to point out to you is look right in the middle of the sign. There's a yellow jacket there. And it says, like the Yellow Jackets, hard to beat. This was back in the Cali Galt era of North Augusta football. And Cali Galt was the Bear Bryant of North Augusta. And they went a little before my time, but they went on a streak of 40-plus games without losing a game. And they tied a few, but they didn't lose. But to show you the community spirit, where have you been in recent years where a store has a permanent sign promoting the local high school? That just shows you what kind of community spirit we had then. It's dissipated some but it in my mind, with one high school in North Augusta, it's still there. And I can remember I had Callie Galt here to speak at one of the mayor prayer luncheons or breakfasts, and he told the story. You know, Callie Galt was a little guy, you'd never think he's a football coach. He was the only guy who could smile and talk at the same time. But he said he always remembered as they won games, they would put, I don't know if it was on this store, but one store, they would say, 39, make it 40. And he said, the week after they lost, and I was at the game at Lions Field, and they lost to Greenville High 14-13 with the classic, we hit the line from the goal line 4 times, and we made a touchdown every time, of course, but they didn't give it to us. We lost the game, the streak ended, and he said he'll never forget the next week the sign said, make it 1. McCool's. McCool's is still there. And believe it or not, as you know, it looks a whole lot better than that. Mr. McCool looked like Mr. Magoo. He was an old bald-headed guy. His claim to fame was you could go to McCool's, and I've gotten this secondhand and believe it's true. I'm not personally knowledgeable of it. He would sell individual cigarettes. You could go into McCool's and buy a cigarette for 2 cents. And he had candy and stuff like that. I guess he sold a lot of cigarettes. I'd never bought one, and there it is today. Boys, it received an upgrade. Wayside Food Store. That is not it. That's another title poem. Wayside was right there. In later years, it was actually the first Zaxby's in North Augusta. And I think when it was Zaxby's, it got a C rating from the health officials. But Les Owens ran Wayside Food Store. He actually had a drive-through in the store where you could drive through and give your order, and he'd fill your order and give it to you. My memories of Wayside Food Store are connected with Mr. Owens' son, Drew. If you knew Drew, Drew was a big boy. He was such a big boy that when we played on the junior high football team, they did not have a jersey big enough to fit Drew. So they had to cut his jersey in half, and they put a panel in the middle of his jersey. So when he ran out on the field, he was 5 space 5. But Drew's daddy was into the Confederate veterans or those kinds of things. He actually had a replica of the Hunley submarine displayed at the Wayside Food Store. Oh, man, I'm going to say in around 1960 or so. But he would go off to all of his Sons of Confederacy meetings or whatever and leave Drew in charge. And on a number of occasions while Mr. Owens was gone, the Wayside Food Store got robbed. It never got robbed while Mr. Owens was there, only when Drew was there. And we just kind of questioned whether there was some, and I'm saying this because Drew's been gone for a good while. I'm not trying to cast any dispersions on his character. The Colonial Store, we've already talked about it. It later became the Big Star. Probably was Ming Yat's longer than anything, any use. They used to have good iced tea at Ming Yat's. And my secretary would all go over and get us 2 iced teas, and it was like a quart styrofoam cup that lasts me all day long. And my daughter loved to get the fried wontons from Ming Yat's. My secretary called it sling cats. And I can remember walking over to the bank in the back of the parking lot, and they must have had 50 boxes of chickens sitting on the parking lot, iced down. And at that point in time, I took somebody over there one time, and when they served us a glass of water and it had a bobby pin in it, we decided we... Petty's and Edenfields. In that picture, you see Charles Petty on the right, and I think his daddy was Charles Petty too, senior and junior. You may know Edward Petty, who's the son and grandson. Old-fashioned meat counter with all kinds of different meats in it. Same way with Edenfields. If you see on the right there, Edenfields was a store in the front of a house. I don't recall Edenfields personally, but look at the size of that house. It was right there on Georgia Avenue. Kilduff's. Kilduff's was a 5 and dime, and you walked in, and on the right side, you could walk down, and everything to the left, you had about 10 feet to the right, and everything left was their counters and the things that they sold, a little bit of everything. And it was, I don't know, Benny Knight State Farm took it over, I'm guessing in the late 60s, early 70s, ran his State Farm agency there for many, many years, and now you know it as the Beveled Edge. There is the North Augusta High School marching band in the Christmas parade. I was surprised to see that we still didn't have the lights strung zigzagged across the street. We did that for many years. You see up there the Georgia Carolina building that we saw earlier. The purpose of this shot is to talk about the P&S supermarket. Again, another grocery store, downtown North Augusta. The novelties of the P&S was they had a parking lot in the back, and they had a parking lot in the front, and they had a checkout counter in the back, and they had a checkout counter in the front. So you could check out as close to your car as physically possible. The other unique thing about the P&S was it was the first supermarket I ever saw that had the moving conveyor belt where you put your food on there and they rolled it to the cash register and rung you up. You know, I could embellish this story and say that was the first one in the Southeast or something like that, but I won't do that. Seven Gables. Seven Gables has had a long and somewhat at times sordid history. It was a hunting lodge primarily for the male visitors of the Hampton Terrace Hotel. In later years, there was the motel behind it, which the Harrison family owned and ran, and then it was sold to Bruce Salter, who most of us know the story of that and his refusal to serve African Americans. And we're not talking about in the 60s then, we're talking, I guess, 80s. And he paid a dear price and an appropriate price for those actions. But ultimately, the building paid the ultimate price. And you see that happened on September the 4th, 2008. I was sitting at home watching Vanderbilt beat South Carolina in probably the first football game of the year, and Richard Rogers from Channel 12 called me and says, "You need to get up here. Seven Gables is on fire." And boy, was it ever. You can tell, if you can look at that picture, you can see the absence of smoke. Usually there's a lot of smoke when something burns. Look at those flames throughout glowing inside like an old campfire mantle on a lantern, gas lantern. It just glowed. It burned pure. It had all that old heart pine and fat lighter, as they call it. At the top, you can see a stream of water going on the building. They brought in a pumper from Sage Valley Industrial Park that poured 4,000 gallons a minute of water on top of it. And it didn't do anything but turn to steam as soon as it hit the flames. It was sad and quick. Panic Pond. I'm tired of asking for shows of hands, but if you're an old timer, you swam in Panic Pond. I meant to look up how it got the name Panic. I don't know. I don't know. Bill, do you know? Okay. Right. Well, it was where the tennis courts are, and behind the community center in North Augusta. And if you've been to the community center, you see that stream through there, and it's got good spring water in there. So they had plenty of water, and it closed. I think someone actually drowned in the pond, and I think that was the cause that they shut it down. And then, you know, as people became more affluent and they had more swimming pools. Bill took me flying one day many, many years ago, and the thing that stood out in my mind more than anything was the number of swimming pools that people had in North Augusta. So that probably had something to do with the demise of the Panic Pond. This is a reunion of some of the people from the Panic Pond. You'll see Don Metz in the wheelchair in the middle, Ted Hamilton, Charles Petty, some of the other names. Jimmy Bell. I'm wondering if that's the Mr. Bell that still lives up on Arlington Heights. He was in my office recently. He's 96 and sharper than most of us. Earl Bainham, George Williams, Harold Thompson, Raymond Bainham. Those are the old timers of North Augusta. Said the reunion was held at Grace Methodist Church in late 79 or early 80. All right, we're getting close to the end. The Heidelberg Inn, right there. That building on the right down there, that became, I think, the first sock gas station, or it was located there. Where that sign says North Augusta is pretty close to where you're sitting right now. This picture was taken in the late 30s, and this ad says, Old Heidelberg Inn will not be affected by the closing of the 13th Street Bridge. Well, when was that? If you see at the bottom, June of 38. This is when they replaced the original bridge that the North Augusta Land Company built to access North Augusta from Augusta. This was the bridge that, the bridge they built in 38 was the bridge that, two-lane bridge that we rode over for years, of which part of it is still there when they widened and went to 4 lanes. Oh, golly, you know, if you're like me, if you think it was 10 years ago, you need to make it 20. It's probably been 30 years ago when they widened the bridge and redid it. As you may have known, they're getting ready to do it again. And they're going to have all these elaborate lighting and stuff. And I think that's set to begin in 24, 25. So just as they said in this ad, drive out to 5th Street to Schultz Hill, turn left on the paving, make sure you're on the paving, all the way into town and get your usual steak and chicken dinners. Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same, but you can't drive out on the 5th Street Bridge anymore because it's closed and it's now for pedestrians and cyclists only. But I got a feeling in the next coming years, just as we are all avoiding I-20 now, and if you're not, you should be, we'll be avoiding the 13th Street Bridge because of all that work that's going to take place. There it is today, or a few years ago. Many of you remember it as Neptune Dive and Ski, Wine World, and to my knowledge, the Highlander is still open. The skating rink right behind us. Originally an A&P, then it was a Colonial before they went to up the street. You can see now it is being repurposed. I believe a group headed by Brett Brannon has bought it. You can see they're underway. They said they were going to have it ready by Masters. They're going to have to work real quick if they're going to get it ready. But they're working on it. It's underway. That sign, is that downstairs in the Arts and Heritage Center, that sign? Somebody had that sign, and they would light up what you were supposed to do. I never did reverse. I don't know if I did too much of the others, but I'd be in real trouble if I tried to do reverse. And then skate your date. I don't know what skate your date means in that picture, and I guess they had a Valentine's skating queen. Okay, that's where I am. If I left something off, I apologize. Those were the places that I remember. It meant a lot to me. If you got any questions, I'll be glad to take them. And we've got a little extra thing here. We got a gun up here that we're going to show you in a minute. A Civil War gun. The barn was the original North Augusta police headquarters and fire truck. The fire truck was in there. And they had a bell in that tower that they would ring. I remember the building vaguely. I remember behind it they had a thing on stilts, a big yellow siren that they would blow to call if there was a fire for the volunteers to. I don't know how they knew where to go. I guess because they didn't have cell phones back then. But they would, we had volunteer firemen, and this was back in the era. First Baptist Church on Sunday mornings had chimes, and they would play hymns on Sunday morning. If you wasn't going to go to church on Sunday morning, you're going to at least hear some hymns, whether you wanted to or not. I'm sure the ACLU would probably stop a church from doing that now, but all right, you ready? You want to show them? Okay. The trolley was before my time now. I mean, the trolley, the trolley went through the 20s. It was the Aiken-Augusta Electric Railway, and it went from North Augusta to Aiken down through the valley. And it's part of the Hampton Terrace Hotel. I know they've had a presentation on the Hampton Terrace Hotel, but they had a system for the Hampton Terrace Hotel where some of the rich folks from up north that had their own private rail cars, they could get the rail car to come up, and they had a siding for it on or near the grounds of the Hampton Terrace, and they could stay in their rail car right by the hotel. Well, I'm surprised by the number that we had. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. It's been a long time for me. I got a little bit nervous when somebody walks in this day and age. That thing is heavy. It is heavy. Solid steel. You want to sit down? Well, I was going to borrow your chair. You want to use the microphone? All right. I'm going to take my water. I don't want you to drink.
This is a gun that, my name is Otis Francis, and I had promised Mary Ann So I had promised I'd bring it down here and show it to her one time. So I brought it down here, not intending to give a presentation, but she's not here. So I still am going to have to bring it back later. But this particular rifle, it is called really a Sharps, referred to as a Sharps Buffalo rifle, and manufactured about 1858 on. Both sides of the Confederate War, Union and the Southern, there were thousands of soldiers armed with this particular rifle, and it is very unique. Most people have never seen one, much less handled one or even heard of one. But I'll tell you how I came to get it. I went to Auburn, which I think people can tell, but during my junior and senior year, they were building I-20 past Auburn. And there was a little rise there where you could look down at the dozers and dirt movers and graders and all that stuff working on the road. And I'd go out there and just watch to see how it was going. And I was standing on that rise one day when an old black fella came up and asked me if I would like to buy a packing rifle. Now, a packing rifle, in my mind, is a muzzle loader, where they pour powder down the barrel, put a bullet on it, ram it down, and then a cap on the back end and shoot it. And that's what a major part of military in the Civil War was actually armed with, was packing rifles, so to speak, or muzzle loaders. They did not have automatic weapons of any form or fashion. But this particular rifle was very popular. Can people hear me in the back without the microphone? Good. I'm about 84 presently.
It's not loaded, right?